Hello, and welcome all to Movie Hunter, the show that tracks down the quality of all sorts of movies. My name is Hunter, and today in the 61st episode, our target is Bolt, produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. Following the release of Lilo and Stitch, the directors, Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois, signed a multi-picture deal with Walt Disney Pictures in November of 2002. In November of 2003, Chris Sanders' reported computer-animated film was given the title American Dog and followed a dog actor named Henry who believes that he's still on television while traveling for a new home with a cat with an eye patch and an oversized and radioactive rabbit. In November of 2005, American Dog was announced for a summer 2008 release. In the fall of 2006, the then Chief Creative Officer of Walt Disney Animation Studios and Pixar, John Lasseter, as well as other directors from Pixar and Disney, attended 2 screenings of the film, giving Chris Sanders notes on how to improve the story. Then President of Walt Disney Animation Studios, Ed Catmull, stated, quote, "Somewhere along the way, the plot had come to include a radioactive, cookie-selling Girl Scout zombie serial killer. I'm all for quirky ideas, but this one had metastasized," end quote. In December of 2006, Sanders was removed from the film, joining DreamWorks Animation not much long after in 2007. On why he was removed, Lasseter said, quote, "Chris Sanders is extremely talented, but he couldn't take it to the place it had to be." Earlier that December month, Disney had laid off about 160 employees from its animation division. Sanders would later state that he had no ill will over being removed from the film, stating, quote, "I think it would have been frustrating if the movie was essentially the same, but only with slight changes. And I suppose my scenes and storylines are still sitting there on the shelf. I could actually pull them out and do them again, but it would be completely different." In February of 2007, Lasseter confirmed that Chris Williams and Byron Howard were going to be the film's new directors. Henry was renamed Bolt, as was the film similarly renamed, and the cat and rabbit characters were removed. Similarly, the setting of the American Southwest was ordered to be removed by Lasseter, given that his recent film, 2006's Cars, had a similar setting. Following all these story changes, the animation team was told to finish the animation in just 18 months as opposed to the 4 years that are usually required. On June 8, 2007, Disney announced that the film, now called Bolt, would release on November 21, 2008. The film would go on to make $310 million on a budget of $150 million. It was directed by Chris Williams and Byron Howard, with a screenplay by Dan Fogelman and Chris Williams. It was produced by Clark Spencer, edited by Tim Mittens, and the music was by John Powell. The cast includes John Travolta, Miley Cyrus, Chloe Grace Moretz, Susie Essman, Mark Walton, Malcolm McDowell, Greg German, James Lipton, Kerry Walgren, and Gray DeLeslie. It became Walt Disney Animation Studios' 48th film after 2007's Meet the Robertsons and before 2009's The Princess and the Frog. The film opens with a puppy named Bolt getting adopted by a little girl named Penny. We then cut 5 years later to Penny and Bolt learning that Penny's father was kidnapped by the cat-loving Dr. Calico, but that he gave Bolt superpowers in order to keep Penny safe. On a rescue mission, Bolt and Penny take down a bunch of Calico's henchmen, only for shooting to end and for it to be revealed to us that this is actually just a fictional show within this universe. We also see how the director of the show has managed to keep the show's fictional existence a secret from Bolt, who thinks that he is actually a superpowered dog. However, low ratings are making the network threaten the show's continuation. To keep up this charade, Bolt must be on set 24/7, much to the dismay of Penny. One day, after filming an episode that ends on the cliffhanger of Penny getting kidnapped by Dr. Calico, Bolt escapes his RV and tries to save Penny. Thinking he has powers, Bolt quickly knocks himself out and falls into a box that is loaded onto a moving truck where he is shipped from Hollywood to New York City. Confused by his powers not working, Bolt seeks the help of some nearby pigeons who point him in the direction of Mittens, a cat who forced the pigeons to scavenge for her, and who Bolt believes is a henchman of Calico, who he calls the Green-Eyed Man. With Bolt having tied her to a leash, Mittens travels with him via U-Haul to Ohio, where the two scavenge for food at a nearby RV park. At this park, they meet a hamster and a hamster ball named Rhino, who is a massive fan of the Bolt TV show, making Mittens realize why Bolt acts so strangely, but she is unable to convince Bolt of the truth. In response to this, Bolt attempts to use his barking ability on Mittens, only to instead attract the attention of Animal Control, who takes both Bolt and Mittens to a shelter. Bolt attempts to free himself using his powers, but Rhino is really the one to free him, making him finally realize that he is just a normal dog. Rhino, who is still unaware of this fact, is able to convince Bolt to at least go save Mittens. After saving her, the trio head further west, where Mittens shows Bolt how to act like a normal dog along the way. Once in Las Vegas, Mittens creates a plan for the trio to just stay there, trying to convince Bolt that humans don't truly love their pets, sharing her story of how her previous owners declawed and abandoned her. Bolt disagrees with this notion, however, and travels alone to Hollywood. Rhino is then able to convince Mittens to follow after him. When Bolt makes it back, he catches Penny in rehearsal with his replacement actor, and believing that Penny has replaced him, leaves. Mittens, however, saw what really happened and explains the situation to Bolt. Just then, Bolt's inexperienced replacement becomes frightened during a fight scene and creates a fire in the set, with Penny becoming trapped inside. Bolt quickly rushes inside and is able to bark loudly enough to get the firefighters to her. Upset with all the mishaps, Penny and Bolt quit the show and go on to move far away into the country, along with Mittens and Rhino, who Penny adopted. Let's start by talking about the main trio of characters, Bolt, Mittens, and Rhino. Firstly, Bolt is a surprisingly bland protagonist. It's hard to really pinpoint what exactly makes him a bland protagonist, but for a character with such an interesting concept behind him, there really lacks charm or wit from it. I might as well start with this comparison now because it will be frequently used in this review, but let's take a look at the first Toy Story film. Buzz Lightyear, like Bolt in this film, has believed his whole life that the world worked one way, and the film shows him realizing that his entire worldview is wrong. However, this film, unlike Toy Story, lacks a very key aspect of what made this work. It knew when to be funny and when to be serious. Buzz Lightyear, thinking he wasn't a toy, was played to great comedic effect throughout the majority of the film, thanks in equal parts to the writing, but also to the ability to bounce off of Woody, given his own character arc. Bolt has none of that. I'll talk more about Mittens in a second, but on the writing side of things, Bolt is never given the opportunity to be really out there in terms of comedy. The only joke that's used is the one where he attempts to use his powers and then nothing happens. It's really not that funny, and especially isn't funny after they do it for the 50th time. It's almost like the film was afraid to be too silly, or else the emotional beats wouldn't hit. And unfortunately, those don't really hit either. I think a good comparison here is with films like Isle of Dogs or John Wick, which both have emotional moments centered around dogs. Isle of Dogs has a stray dog named Chief who comes to care about a boy named Atari, who is searching for his lost dog. This works not because Chief is a dog, but because it relates back to both characters and their stories. In the film John Wick, his dog is a gift from his dead wife, and this dog dying isn't just sad because it's a dog, it's also sad because of what it represents to John. In Bolt, however, no such connection really exists. A lot of the emotion feels very much rooted in the fact that Bolt is a dog, and therefore we feel a natural connection to him. His relationship with Penny just isn't shown well enough to really make all too much of an impact. Again, look at Toy Story, which was able to define a relationship between Woody and Andy within the opening credits of the film. That then takes us to Mittens, who is the Woody to Bolt's Buzz Lightyear, and once again we have a Toy Story comparison to make. Woody's character arc was him realizing that he wasn't in charge anymore and having to get over his ego. This leads to a lot of funny funny moments when his replacement doesn't even realize or seem to care that he was his replacement. Mittens has no such character arc. For a majority of the film, she's just forced to be along for the ride because Bolt thinks that she works for the villain of his show. This doesn't cause for a natural clash between them and is much more so just an annoyance to Mittens. That is until Bolt saves her from the pound after realizing that he's not a superhero, and saves her because he got her captured in the first place. Mittens, however, treats this like someone actually risking themselves for her and showing her kindness. Again, this works on paper, but in execution, Mittens is not shown to have these problems at all until later in the film, where she reveals that her previous owners declawed and disowned her, leading her to believe that humans don't actually love their pets. This leads to one of the most forced third act breakups I've ever seen in a movie, where Bolt and Mittens decide to go separate ways after a forced argument, all for the sake of creating additional tension, only for Rhino to talk to Mittens and reunite with him again. Speaking of whom, Rhino is a very basic comedic relief character. Since comparing this film to better films seems to be my strategy for this review, let's take a look at Chicken Joe from the 2007 film Surf's Up. Chicken Joe serves as the comedic relief of that film, and in my review of that film, I unironically called him the pinnacle of the comedic relief character. This is, in short, because he plays an active role in the film, is actually comedic, and most importantly to this film, Chicken Joe's role as a static character who doesn't change or grow as the film goes on fits perfectly with the main theme of that film. Rhino embodies no such themes that are present in Bolt. Comedy is subjective, but I personally didn't find him to be that funny, and not even because his jokes didn't land, but because it's hard to even remember what his jokes were, or if they were even there to begin with. I feel like the joke most of the time was that he was just energetic. Similarly, Rhino does not play an active role in the film, existing purely as a third entity for Bolt and Mittens to talk to when they are not with each other. They could have done something interesting with the fact that he's a fan of the Bolt TV show, but instead, it only results in him being hyper and easily excitable, and plays no significant role in the plot of the film. Overall, I see the visions with each of these characters, but each of them is poorly executed in my opinion. Next, I'd like to take a minute to discuss a major missed opportunity in the film that seems like it was really going somewhere but was abruptly cut. You see, the second side of this coin that got cut short was with the stuff with Penny and the TV show itself. I think that the best part of the film is the fake-out beginning, which makes it seem like it's going to be a spy thriller type of movie before revealing what is actually real life in the film. It's actually a fairly smart start to the movie, even if the twist is immediately ruined to anyone who knows anything about the movie prior to watching it. We then meet the director of the TV show and see his dedication to making sure that Bolt doesn't know that he's on a TV show. Admittedly, this is pretty dumb and isn't at all helped by his explanation that makes zero sense, but just stay with me. We then see a person sent from the network that the show is run on, who is cold to the director's philosophy and only cares about getting numbers up. I'd like to continue here, but unfortunately that's as far as it goes. Yep, we never see this director character again, and we see the network person once more when she manipulates Penny into continuing the show. Though the introduction to the concept was a little dumb, I think there was real potential there with a story about networks forcing directors to prioritize profit and viewers rather than the story and art. This becomes especially true when the ending is all about Penny and Bolt deciding that their lives would be better without acting and decide to retire. I have a sneaking suspicion, though, that Disney kind of put a stop to that storyline. I really wasn't surprised to learn about all the trouble this movie had behind the scenes, because it unfortunately shows quite a bit, and especially when considering this abandoned storyline. Additionally, it becomes easier to believe that Disney interfered here, given all their live-action TV shows on Disney Channel that probably had similar stories behind the scenes. I give Bolt a 4 out of 10 for being pretty generic and not following through on a lot of things it sets up, and overall just not being a favorite of mine. The characters all had potential, but none of it is followed up on. The only scene I can say that I really liked was the road trip scene, which had some charm that I was desperately looking for in the rest of the film. It does have a few redeeming qualities, but yeah, this film has a lot of issues, for sure. Well, that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to share any opinions you had on the movie. A new episode releases each week, so stay tuned to see which film I cover next. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.